joining me. Sorry for the audio, I've turned that down, so I hope this is better for you to hear. So we've got about 2 people here with me at the moment, so we're just going to see if a few more people join us. In the meantime, if you want, you can share your screen, so you can come on screen with me. You can also throw some questions into the chat if you like. Cool, yeah, so we'll see how this goes. Hi, Laura. We'll just give it another few minutes because it's not quite 10 o'clock yet. And then what I will do is I will fully share that screen that you can see on the side there, so that that goes all big and we can see a little bit more what's happening. And we hope that the connection holds. If the connection gets a little bit worse because I am hanging around in Bali, do let me know. Hi guys, welcome. I haven't really started yet. I just want to give it another 2 minutes or so. Just wait until 10 o'clock and we will get started as soon as possible. Now, just to let you know, I am here by myself. So if you want to ask something, feel free to come on the screen with me and pretty much just interrupt and ask. If you want to, you can also ask your questions in the chat over there on the left. Whatever works for you, not a problem. We'll see how we go with that. And I will try and answer your questions either as we go in the presentation or after the talk, or yeah, if you're coming onto the screen, then you can just ask me straight away there. Okay, cool. So I'm hoping everybody's having a good morning if you're in the UK. I'm in Indonesia, so for me, it's starting to be afternoon here. Hope you caught some presentations already, some sessions. All right, okay. So it's 5 o'clock where I am. That doesn't mean that I've got a drink here with me. There's a bottle of water there. It's 10 o'clock where you are. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump into the presentation. Hi, Kelly, thank you for joining. And we'll get started with that. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about is how to go from recreational to technical diving, why you would even want to entertain that thought, other than because you want to look just as cool as those 2 divers in this picture here, when might be a good time to do it, and how you would go about going from recreational diving, whether you're experienced or not, to technical diving. Now then, before I really jump into it, maybe I'll tell you a little bit more about Dark Horizon Diving and about myself. I'm Yvonne, I'm a TDI instructor trainer based in Asia, in Bali at the moment. I've been in Asia for about 6 years now, and even when the world went topsy-turvy 6 months ago, I sort of looked at where I was and decided that it would still be the best place to hunker down and just kind of wait things out a little bit. I've been a technical diver since 2011, and I did actually take my first steps into technical diving in the cold waters of the north of England and Scotland. So if you're thinking, Asia, it's all very easy, I do have dry suit diving roots. I became a tech instructor about 5 years ago in 2015. I now teach back mount, side mount, and rebreather on the AP diving rebreathers. And when I'm not teaching, I dive. And most of my diving now is technical, or at least if it is a no-stop dive, then it will be a side mount dive. I've got reefs at my doorstep, so I'm lucky for that. I love exploring wrecks, and there are some caves to be discovered in Indonesia, so they're very, very, very high up on my list to be having a look at maybe next year as well. Dark Horizon Diving is a company that I started last year to really focus on what I like to do, share my passion for technical diving and train my future technical diving teammates, really. That's the idea. It's a small company. We're currently only offering technical diving, small groups, quite often one-on-one, one-on-two courses, TDI courses, but also guided diving, as well as some trips further afield. So much about that. Thanks to everyone that's joined in the meantime. We're really just going to get started. And if you remember that first slide, why should you transition into technical diving, when and how? This is the first slide of the why. So why would you want to become a technical diver? First reason for me, exploration. Going places that no one, or at least not many people, have been before. When I became a diver, I always had this thing of looking that little bit further down the reef and going, what is there? And what do I need to do to be able to go there? And technical diving has allowed me and has allowed other divers to go that little step further, to take a look at what there is and what you can see. And to me, that's a really big motivation. It isn't about taking crazy risks. It's just about going and looking and seeing that there is something and trying to find out what the something might be. Another big reason, and if you're diving in the UK, I think that's one of the reasons for technical diving as well, shipwrecks. Now, this picture is from the Momokawa Maru in Truk Lagoon. It's not a UK wreck, but it's one of these wrecks where there's just so many artifacts still there, but there's also so much life. And to me, shipwrecks are something that allows you to connect diving into history with just diving, with seeing reefs. And it was actually shipwrecks being discovered off the east coast of Scotland that got me into technical diving, that made me decide, yeah, I really have to do this. I want to see more. Those wrecks at the time were being discovered between 40 and 60 meters. So they're so close, but so far. That's what inspired me to become a technical diver. And I think shipwrecks are high on the list of a lot of people to make them go into technical diving. Next, caves, going to the end of the earth, really going inside the earth. Cave diving is probably the most mentally and technical challenging type of diving, at least from my perspective. And there's still so much being discovered. We haven't even scratched the surface yet, I think, especially here in Indonesia. There's a lot of exploration going on where cave diving is concerned at the moment. So another massive, massive reason to become a technical diver. Last but not least, knowledge and skills. Even if you don't want to go deep, you do not want to penetrate wrecks, you do not want to explore caves, a technical diving course will leave you as a better diver. You can't really get around that. The skills are challenging. It is pushing you that little bit further, but all of that will transition back to any future dives that you do. So as that slide says there, it's good investment. Where does technical diving start? Is a good question. I think there's no real one-size-fits-all answer, but one thing that's sort of common to most technical dives is you will have more detailed dive planning. So the dive plan and diving safety really take precedence over anything else. So everything I've just said about looking at a different part of the reef, going into a wreck, going into caves, all of that comes after we've made sure that the team is okay, that everybody is okay with the dive, is okay with how things are going, and is happy to continue. What else is part of technical diving? Going beyond no-stop limits, going into overhead environments, using different gases. So richer nitrox is going beyond the 40% that maybe as a recreational diver you're already trained to use. Using trimixes, using 2 to 3 to 4 different gases on a dive just to optimize your decompression, your dive profile. Using more equipment, you'll see the 2 divers in there, they've got a few more things clipped to them. Slightly different equipment, although a lot of the basics remain the same. And technical diving does require, we touched on this, a high level of skills, both on land and underwater. A dive doesn't really start once you splash. There's a lot of preparation, often going into complex dives. What about the risks? Now, if you want to dive with a profile that includes mandatory decompression stops, there will be higher risk. And that is something that you do accept as a technical diver. You cannot return to the surface once you have deco stops. We call that having a soft ceiling. So as you are coming up, you have to stop, depending on your dive profile, let's say in 12 meters, 9 meters, 6 meters, just before you surface. Again, that's a soft ceiling. Compared to that, in an overhead environment, in a wreck or in a cave, you would have what's called a hard ceiling. And it is really what it says on the tin. If you're inside a shipwreck, just like that picture showing here, you cannot necessarily start ascending straight away. So yes, that carries higher risks, but you train to mitigate those risks. You train for any number of emergencies that we can possibly imagine. You carry redundant equipment in order to mitigate those risks, and you plan for any possibly foreseeable contingency before you set out for your dive. So that's what I mean by there's a lot more preparation going into those dives. And all of that preparation then makes your diving safer. When is the right time to transition from recreational to technical diving? Ultimately, you need to answer that for yourself. Are you ready? Do you feel ready? How comfortable are you in the water right now? How do you feel about having to manage additional things, be it equipment, be it a dive plan, be it dealing with maybe being uncomfortable but having to stay there because you do have that decompression obligation? All of those questions would, all of the answers to these questions would feed into your possible decision to decide whether or not you want to become a technical diver. Here are a few considerations. So it's about more than the course prerequisites. Course prerequisites are to give you an idea of what a training agency thinks when you could potentially start looking at technical diving. So let's take a look at TDI, because those are the courses I teach, so that's the curriculum I'm most familiar with. You need to be an open water diver with 25 dives to start an intro to tech. What does an intro to tech teach you? It teaches you, for example, how a twin set works, propulsion techniques. It really sharpens your buoyancy and your trim if they're not there yet. For some people, they are at 25 dives. For some people, they're really not. And it's not about judging that. It's really about saying, okay, where are we and how can we use this course, these dives, to really give you a foundation, to really give you something solid on which you can build your diving, on which you can build further skills. If you then take it a step further, advanced nitrox deco procedures, that is what the ANDP stands for, and that's your 45-meter course. Deco procedures can also be replaced by helitrox, especially when gas density, dark water, cold water plays a role. So 45 meters, you need to be an advanced open water diver with a basic nitrox qualification and 25 dives to your name to start that course. Now, in my eyes, that's a relatively low number, but it depends on the individual. More importantly, looking at your existing diving skills will give you a better idea. What's your buoyancy like, your trim, your stability in the water, the ability to stop. We all can fin and try and stay stable, but just holding, just looking at something and spending time. Mask skills, they're probably more of a thing that we associate with people struggling with in their initial certification courses. But if you're not comfortable with those, you're not going to be comfortable removing your mask whilst carrying 2 or 3 tanks. What's your awareness like? Do you know where your team is? Do you know where your buddies are? Are you following a guide? And where's the guide? Where are you in relation to that? And generally, how comfortable are you underwater? Outside of the water, equipment familiarity. So where I am based in Bali, in many recreational diving businesses, the equipment is set up for the divers. Whether it is their own or not doesn't make so much of a difference, but it is prepared for you. That means, whether it's your own equipment or rental, that it may not quite be right. Technical divers wouldn't accept that, but because at the end of the day, it's your equipment, it's your life support equipment, really, and you want everything to be in exactly the right place. So we're potentially a little bit obsessive about details. Procedures, that is pre-dive safety checks. That is not just getting your equipment ready, discussing your dive plan, making sure everything is in order. And what about diving theory knowledge? Depending on what courses you've done and how interested you are, you might already know a lot. But if you're sort of thinking, well, how does this 1 bar, 1 atmosphere, 2 atmospheres, half the volume thing work? Maybe before stepping into the technical world, you want to spend a little bit of time recapping. So all of those might give you an idea whether you think, okay, now's the right time, or give it another week or so, give it another year, give it another few months. And also, with many of us now on land, now would be a good time to start recapping some of this or preparing with the e-learning part of a course and really brush up on your knowledge there. So I've gone into preparation a little bit already. Another thing you can do now, if you can get out to dive, make your recreational dives count. You can practice trim and hovering and stability on every single dive that you do. That doesn't matter whether you are carrying 2 tanks, 3 tanks, single tank, any dive you do, you can really take some time out and practice being in correct trim, practice stopping, being stable, get your buddies to help you, maybe get somebody to film you. Video can be quite harsh because you can see absolutely everything that's gone right and the things that can do with a bit of improvement. So that would be something to do. Take another look at diving physics and physiology. The principles there are the same for technical divers. We apply them to greater depths and to different environments, perhaps, but the basics, the stuff that you learned on your open water course, that's what we're building on. If you're bringing your own gear for a technical diving course, try and be familiar with it. Or if you've just invested in a lot of new equipment, okay, that's cool. But let the instructor maybe know that you want to spend a little bit of extra time setting everything up, becoming familiar with it. A lot of things can be achieved with an extra day, with an extra couple of dives. And be familiar with your dive computer. I know that sounds so obvious, but it's one of these things, you might be using functions on it that you haven't used yet. So if you can spend a little bit of time preparing for that, then you'll arrive for your technical diving course in a much better place. Where do you start? Technical diving is a journey, so it isn't a case of taking one single course and then being done and that is it. It's really the start, and there's really always stuff to learn. There are always things to still discover, be it equipment, be it techniques, be it new dive sites, new environments. There really is a lot of stuff that that sort of opens up when you start technical diving. How much time is needed? My biggest recommendation would be not to rush your training. The stuff you're learning is complex, it is involved, so taking an extra day or two or a week really makes a big difference. Introductory courses, something like an intro to tech, something like a very basic foundational side mount course, might take as little as 2 or 3 days. Now, that's enough to find out whether this technical diving thing is for you, whether you think that this is something you want to invest more time, more budget in, whether you want to develop and grow in it further. It gives you an idea of how the equipment works. It gives you an idea of what's required to push it further. So it's a great way of making sure that you're really sure this is what you want to do, and it's a good way to try something out before making a big commitment. Initial certification courses between 4 and 7 days, a week can really get you somewhere. Might sound like a lot for a course based on 8 or 10 dives, especially in a tropical environment, but it's not only the dives. There's equipment preparation, there are land-based drills, there are equipment adjustments, briefing, debriefing, all of those things coming together is what makes your course. So a lot of the practice has to happen in the water, but if we do not brief those skills, if we do not debrief these skills, then you won't actually really get that learning experience. So take your time. Plus, when you are completing decompression dives, you do need to limit repetitive dives. It's often one dive per day only, which then leaves time for all the other things. But it doesn't mean that you're starting to move at a slower pace. Now, $64,000 question, which training agency should you choose? And if you've looked into technical diving, if you've been on some of the forums at all, you will have heard this already. It's not the agency, it's the instructor. When you are looking for a technical diving instructor, find somebody who teaches and hopefully also does the sort of diving that you would like to do. Find out whether you click with them. Ask them about the training philosophy, how they conduct their courses. Technical diving courses can be quite intense, so it helps if you're getting on with the person that's going to teach you. It helps if you think that their idea of how they train, of how they dive, of how they teach will work for you. Look for personalized training schedules, small groups. At the moment, with the diving industry having slowed down, personalized training is really, really readily available. So a lot of instructors are in potentially I think we might have some problems with the connection. Let me just have a look. Guys, if you still hear me and see me okay? Okay, thanks, Elise, and hello. Excellent. Let me go back to sharing the screen then, and we'll continue. All right, cool. Oops. Technologically challenged. Here we go. So, all right, cool. So, personalized training. We've all had a challenging year, but we're not as busy as we are in other years. It's not really a secret either. Personalized training, now's the time to get it. Now it's really, really available. On the agency side itself, take a look at course structures. Some agencies' courses are more flexible, others are really, really set in stone. Check whether e-learning is available. That way, you don't spend your evenings during the course studying as much. You can arrive for the course more prepared. I'm a real fan of recommending e-learn to my prospective students because it means that you arrive with questions. That means we will still have theory sessions, we'll still go through stuff, but we do it more targeted. We don't have to spend quite so much time doing things like PowerPoints and stuff like that. So if you can get e-learning, get e-learning, and you will still have time with the instructor you will still have time with the instructor going through the theory that's covered in the course. And how does the course progression work? So I've said a little bit earlier, technical diving is a journey. So let's say you take your initial certification course. What comes after? How do you go on from there? How can you progress? Does that work for what you want to do? Does that come together with the diving that you want to do? Don't worry though, it's not a huge commitment. Similar to recreational diving, you can chop and change between agencies, you can pick and mix and go forward and backward. Lots of agency curriculums will work together and fit into each other. Where should you train? Now, obviously at the moment, part of the answer to this is wherever you can travel to. When I wrote this presentation about 3 months ago, we already had this coronavirus situation, but still, ideally train where you will dive. So if you can train in the environment that you will later want to dive in, then you're pretty much learning in the conditions that you will dive in. So if your goal is to explore shipwrecks in the UK, then training in the UK makes a lot of sense. Your equipment will be set up for that environment, procedures will be similar. However, on the other hand, if that means disrupting your training into lots of different weekends, then maybe think about training in one go, training on holiday, training somewhere where you can do all the training in one sort of bigger chunk of time, and then apply the skills that you've just learned to the environment that you then want to dive in. So both of these options have their own advantages and disadvantages, taking into account traveling, taking into account restrictions that you might face for budget, for everything else. Weigh it up, make a list of pros and cons, and see what will then work out for you. Another either or question, twin sets or side mount. Now, if you've potentially been in the Dark Horizon diving booth, you might have noticed that we have another presentation a little bit after this one on side mount diving and advantages for it and why it's a great idea to dive side mount even in open ocean. But twin sets or side mounts, advantages and disadvantages. Twin sets tend to feel more compact. Side mount can be configured very, very, very flexibly. Twin set divers can get all of their bottom gas from one regulator because the two tanks are connected through a manifold, an isolation manifold. But in side mount, it's less likely that you might have a catastrophic failure, lose all your gas, because the two tanks are completely separate. If you can, try both before you choose the one that you liked better, that you felt more comfortable in for more training. Think about what you will find where you are diving. So in the UK, for example, twin sets are relatively readily available. Lots of boats are equipped for it. At the same time, side mount is growing, but not every destination will have twin sets available. So maybe being able to do both is a good idea. If you're already thinking that you're going to head into caves and that where you want to go cave diving, side mount really is the best way to go, then it would make sense to complete your training in side mount configuration already. So think about the diving that you have in mind, think about where you will be diving, and remember, it's never a dead end. There's always the possibility to cross over and dive the other configuration. So you have an option here to go sideways, to try both and really develop what you want to develop. So at the end of the day, keep an open mind, start with the one that you're more comfortable in, that makes more sense for you right now, and then consider just widening it out as and when it makes sense to you. What equipment will you need? Of course, you could buy everything at the beginning, everything before you come for your courses, but quite often that means that you might end up buying twice because you don't quite know yet what you like. You don't quite know yet what your preferred option is. So buying step by step is probably a little bit more of a beneficial way of getting your tech equipment together. You have the principle of redundancy, meaning that for many pieces of gear, you're going to need at least two of. Owning tech equipment in the long run is definitely worth it. Having everything exactly in the right place, having the exact piece of equipment that you are familiar with will make a huge difference to your dive, more so than you find it normally makes with recreational diving. And it will also improve your ability to deal with emergencies, with situations where things get a little bit uncomfortable. Try before you buy if you can. Most tech diving shops instructors will offer equipment for rental for the courses, and it's a good idea to work out whether something works for you. I always recommend to talk to your tech instructor before you're going shopping, because what looks really great in a brochure might not be what at the end of the day really suits you. So step by step, try before you buy, build up your equipment as you go along. Dive computer, one that is made for intentional technical diving. Harness and backplate is something that really makes a difference when it's fitted to you, and it really does fit you. So that's something you might want to invest in relatively early. Regulators, especially now that we are very concerned with disinfecting and keeping things clean and separate. Personal items first is a good strategy to have when you're thinking about buying your own stuff. The gear you already own, some of it can actually transition with you. So think about your mask, think about your fins, consider your exposure suit. A lot of those will be completely suitable for any technical diving that you're planning to do. If they're not, then okay, you might have to upgrade it. But if you're already diving in short fins that allow precision propulsion techniques, then you're already on your way. Dive computer, if it is a fairly basic computer, it may work as your backup. If you're already all geared up, then that can just become your main act as a computer. Torches and other accessories, they'll be needed, but you may have to reconsider where you're stowing them so that they are in your slipstream, so that they're streamlined, there's less potential for entanglement. All of those are considerations, but all of those things are not things that you need to figure out on your own right now. All of those things are things that you will go through on an initial certification course. And some things may be reconfigurable. So you might even be able to use the same set of regulators that you use on a twin set for your side mount diving with a few adjustments and with a few additional parts that you add on, take off as needed. Now, my current favorite topic and my current favorite kind of diving, rebreather diving. What about them? They are an awesome piece of kit. I mean what I say. They are an investment. Training, the unit, it is an investment, but it will completely open up your diving. So for those of you that are not familiar with rebreathers, that don't really know what they're doing, they basically recycle your breathing gas, eliminating carbon dioxide as you breathe out. That is what the scrubber is for. There's a chemical reaction happening, meaning that you do not rebreathe the carbon dioxide that you have just exhaled. And oxygen is added either manually or electronically, as your body metabolizes it. You will still carry open circuit tanks, just like you can see in this picture here of Marie, in case something goes wrong. It's what we call bailout, and how many of them and what gases are in them depends entirely on what your plan is for your rebreather dive. So I've just said they're an awesome piece of kit. Why do I think that? You get more time underwater. Your carbon dioxide scrubber really becomes your biggest limiting factor, as well as your bailout gas. How much time you have depends on the dive profile, the rebreather design, different diving conditions. So for the last few months, and I'm sorry if I'm making you jealous, I've had the opportunity, together with a friend, to go to a number of dive sites that here in Bali are not usually technically dived. Being on rebreathers has given us the opportunity to be somewhat flexible with our dive planning. Now, the dive sites we've visited are known for current, so we haven't been able to necessarily say we will definitely go to that depth and incur this much decompression. It's more of a case of saying, okay, we'd like to go to that depth, however, we need to look at the conditions here and there. And if we cannot accept the risk for that amount of decompression time for the way up, then we need to just adjust our dive plan. Rebreathers give you that flexibility. So they are an investment, but especially also if you're thinking of diving deeper than 45, 50 meters on Trimix, your cost per dive will be a lot less because you are saving on helium. Helium is the most expensive gas. That is pretty much true around the world. Depending on where you are, it is more or less expensive, but on a rebreather, in a rebreather, you will use a small amount of helium because you have a small tank in your rebreather. So the rebreather that you're seeing in the picture, the AP Inspiration, has 3-liter cylinders. And now, even if you have 50% helium in a 3-liter cylinder, that's nowhere near as much as you would have in a 12-liter steel and an 11-liter aluminium. So you are using a lot less gas, meaning your cost per dive will become more manageable. What is rebreather diving like? In one word, different. Everything you think you know about buoyancy will change. Think about controlling your buoyancy without your lungs. You're breathing in and out of a pair of counter lungs. So that means when you're breathing in, you will not rise up, and when you're breathing out, you will not start sinking. It doesn't affect your buoyancy, breathing in and out. You're controlling your buoyancy with your wing and by adding or subtracting gas from your counter lungs from your overall loop. Is it for you? Good question. I've talked about not having to make a massive commitment to get into technical diving straight away. So similarly to how you can do try dives on open circuit, how people do discover scuba diving days, you can try rebreather diving. There are programs out there, one of the ones we offer here at Dark Horizon in Bali, where you simply come and join us for one day where we go through basic theory, we go into a pool, and then we go for either one long or two somewhat shorter shallow dives, giving you an idea of what rebreather diving might be like. So you don't have to commit to a full course, never mind to buying a unit, before you've even tried CCR diving. Do some research. CCR qualifications are what's called unit specific. What does that mean? That means if you do your course on an AP diving, inspiration or evolution, like the ones in the picture here, you're qualified to rebreather dive that unit. If you then want to dive another brand of rebreather, sort of like you want to change from one brand of car to another, you will have to do a crossover. Why is that? Because rebreathers are different enough from one model to the next that they warrant hours in the water with an instructor trained on that particular unit to make you aware of what is different between the individual units that you are considering. It's not necessarily a whole course again, but it's really focused on understanding what's different between the individual units. Training, like any diving training, is done in steps. Depending on your existing qualification, your first step, you might have heard of it being referred to as mod 1, either takes you to 30 or even as far as 45 meters. Next step would be 60 meters. Next step is 100 meters. In between those steps, there are hours underwater, dive numbers. So it isn't the case of just taking 4 weeks and getting all of those qualifications done. You do need to build up experience. In any case, a basic open circuit technical diving qualification is really useful, and in some cases it's required before you learn to dive rebreather, because you're already understanding a lot of the concepts a little bit better. So it makes it a less steep learning curve. Having talked about all of this learning and all of these courses and everything, there is such a thing as technical fun dives, and they're just as important as courses are to your development as a tech diver. Building up experience between taking courses is the best way to consolidate skills and to allow those newly learned motor skills to become second nature. And there's really no substitute for time spent in water. Many tech dive centers, tech instructors offer technical experience dives, accompany tech dives, tech diving trips, and they're worth it. Just like you got your recreational diving qualifications and then you went and did fun dives, you can do the same thing with technical diving, only with more equipment, more gases, and more fun. When you come to do this, you find that you'll be responsible for more things. Your equipment setup, you'll be involved in the dive planning, you might even get to lead a dive, because really the only way to get practice at leading dives is to do it every so often. And that's a big difference from recreational dives. So you'll find that rather than being in this hierarchy of there's a guide and you just follow, you will be part of a team where everybody has their own jobs, everybody has their own responsibilities. So that's me kind of coming to the end, towards the end of this presentation. Above all, transitioning to technical diving is a step-by-step process. Remember, you can start slowly, you don't have to commit all of your money, all of your time just yet, but it is addictive. So you might not be planning on committing all of this right now, but you might just find that you want to. At least that's what happened to me. It all started with 1 or 2 courses, and it's come a long way since then. So this is the point where I say thank you to all of you that have stayed with me and have listened. And I'd like to ask you guys, if you have any questions, do you want to maybe throw some questions into there? Clementine, for people coming to train with you, is it okay to come with 0 pieces of tech equipment and rent everything? And out of curiosity, how much does a rebreather cost, more or less? So for the first question, yes, you can come without your own equipment. Looking at Dark Horizon specifically, our course prices are, for the entry-level courses, structured so that equipment is included, except your mask, wetsuit, and fins. If you're not bringing those, you can hire them at an extra cost. They're only excluded because most people do bring them. So yes, you could come with 0 pieces of tech equipment of your own and rent everything. How much does a rebreather cost? How big is a piece of string? If we're talking about British pounds, you're looking at, and this is really different between the types of rebreathers and how many of the bells and whistles you're actually you want to get, but you're sort of looking at, for a new rebreather, between £6,000 and £10,000. If you're about to faint, please don't faint. Please don't. There are options of buying used rebreathers, and that's not a bad thing. Yes, used diving equipment can be a good or a bad idea. In the case of rebreathers is something that need a little bit of commitment. So quite a few people find that they become qualified, but then life takes over. So they don't have all that much time to devote, and that rebreather ends up spending a lot of time in their garage. And that's where there's a really strong used rebreather market, so you can get into it for much less than that. My first rebreather was something that I bought used, and yes, it needed service. Yes, it needed a few things replaced, but the investment was, for me as a then diving instructor, yes, I was a tech diving instructor already, but it was a much more achievable investment, so to speak. Anyone else have any questions? I noticed some of you have just, welcome, have just jumped into the session. We've gone through a lot of the presentation parts already, but if you guys have got any specific questions, or if you want to go over something specific, feel free to ask. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Laura's
Hi, Yvonne. I thought it might be easier to just come on screen and ask you, just because by the time I've typed it all out. That's a really useful presentation, actually. It obviously sits, as you know, kind of right where I'm at. I've done quite a bit of recreational diving, and I'm kind of on that kind of should I, shouldn't I kind of area. And I was thinking... I was thinking, there's a bit where you said about this personalised training that just sounded really nice. The idea of dropping all the current stuff I'm dealing with and just having a few weeks kind of just having that really kind of personalised, like what works for you kind of training. But I actually wanted to track back a little bit to something you said at the beginning, which was like, like the reasons for technical diving, like, because I think there's a perception that it's like just deep, dark and dangerous and that's the only reason you do it, and I think there's probably a lot more. So I just wondered if you could maybe say a bit more about that, kind of like why people might want to do it for different reasons. Do you have like in the people that you see coming to see you, are there like different categories, different kind of, you know, what's motivating people beyond that one area that people see?
It depends a little bit. So there are definitely people who want to just explore, and deep, dark, and dangerous is exactly what they're looking for. But there's also actually quite a substantial part of my students who come to just become better divers and who are actually very much in two minds over whether they ever want to go particularly deep, whether they ever want to push to 50, 60 meters. They'll then find out that it's a slippery slope. But so that just improving your skills and also learning more about diving. I think if we go back a few years, then there was this perception that in order to learn more about diving, you need to become a professional. You need to look at dive master training or instructor training. But if you don't want to teach or you don't want to guide, why would you necessarily push down that route? Because if it's about building knowledge and skills, then technical diving fits that bill better. And what you then do with it is an entirely different thing. So personal development also, I find existing dive professionals, recreational instructors like to have their own diving. So they like this idea of, this is the kind of diving that I teach. Open water courses, advanced open waters, DSDs, that's my bread and butter. But actually, for me personally, to progress as a diver, to have my own kind of diving, technical diving then adds that little bit. And it doesn't always have to be super deep, super involved, but even something like a basic side mount course teaches you a few more things. It introduces redundancy, it introduces additional equipment, it brings so many things there that it can really sort of either set you on that journey or give you something that you do when you're not doing your teaching. So it's really why you learn to tech dive. There isn't really a wrong answer to the question of why you would want to try it. You know, people try bungee jumping. I tried bungee jumping because I thought it was cool. That's quite a valid thing. You just want to develop your diving, try something new. Yeah, fair enough. Who are we to judge?
Yeah, I like what you said there about the redundancy bit, because that's probably the bit that's got me hooked a little bit, is the idea of it being more independent, more autonomous, not necessarily to go to great depths, but just to be more equipped and prepared to look after myself and not necessarily need to be with other people a lot of the time. Or maybe just be a bit more independent, not relying on other people. So that's...
Yeah, and also to open your horizon as a diver a little bit, pardon the pun, but it's to kind of say that there's more to learn. After your open water course, after your advanced open water course, you know a lot, but there's so many other aspects of diving that are interesting to know about. There's so much more that happens in our bodies, which may or may not be as impactful at limited depths, but then becomes more important when you are pushing the depth a bit. So it really, to me, felt like I was pushing the door open to more learning, to more knowledge, and really more understanding of diving.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for the talk. Actually, it's really, really useful. I think, like I said, it quite sits where I'm at, and I was sitting thinking of questions the whole way through, and then you kept answering them all, because it's a really kind of useful kind of summary of the different questions that I have. So yeah, thank you for that. It's a great talk.
Well, that's kind of the idea. Yeah.
And
it's just...
Sorry, I'm just thinking you're probably going to expand even more on the side mount end of it.
Oh, we can, or you can join the presentation in 45 minutes, unless that clashes with whatever you've got on next. And there's just more people have joined us, so I just want to say hello.
I'm going to run off because I need to head off, so I'm just going to leave the screen here. See you later.
We'll run off. And you know that you can leave messages in the chat function, or you can find ways of contacting us directly if you have other questions. Anyone that has joined us really recently, sort of in the last 10-15 minutes, we did finish the slides that you can still see on the screen here. But if you've got any specific questions about starting your technical diving journey, continuing your technical diving journey, feel free to either pop them in the chat or come on screen with me, and just like Laura did there, and I'll be happy to answer them and see what else there is. Yeah, and sorry for the technical difficulties in between, but it is a Balinese internet connection, so we're actually doing pretty well with that. Anyone got any other questions? You're still here. Have I answered them all, really? There must be more questions. Thank you, Marianne. I'm glad you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you, Elise. I will pop by the Emperor booth or one of your sessions sometime over the weekend. Anyone else got any more questions? Kelly, yes, I will see you in 45 minutes then. Cool. Get your questions ready. Well, if you have no questions for me, then can I ask you guys who are still hanging here listening, who of you is already a technical diver, or who is actually looking to start technical diving? Don't run away. There's people dropping out, I can see that. Busy with your first tech course? Cool. Clementine, want to start getting into it? Excellent. Hi, Marvin. Good to have you here. We've just reached the stage where we are looking at questions. Frank's looking to start in a year or two. Cool. So hopefully I've given you some ideas there of what you can play with right now, of what you might, what you could do to prepare, how you can sort of get ready for your tech diving course. Hi, Ian. So how's your first course going, Kelly? Yes, intense. That is one word. Frank, that's for you as well. So it's quite an intense thing. There's a lot of information. And in some ways, there's probably a lot of information in all technical courses, but if you can cast your mind back a little bit to how you felt on your open water course, there's so much coming at you. So try and take in as much as you can, obviously. It will feel quite intense. See if you can get some extra dives in at the end of the course or relatively soon after. You will find that that'll really help raise your confidence level, and it'll really help remember things. So don't be disheartened when things don't work first time. Some people are really, really natural at diving. I wasn't, so I had to practice for things, but practicing to me now is part of the fun of it. And there's still dives where I'm changing configuration, for example, and sometimes it goes right, and sometimes it just turns out to be something that we laugh about afterwards looking at the video. So just take that all as part of it, because from all of these things, you're taking things. Yeah, COVID again. It will feel like starting all over again. With the valve drills, is it reaching the valves? For a lot of people, it's this thing where you feel that you have to be very bendy. So you don't have to be very bendy, I promise. I'm not very bendy, so see, like I can't really get much further than this. So a lot of the valve drills and reaching your valves is about working out how you reach for them. So maybe coming right past your ear and then moving sideways will help you reach them. Maybe also take a look at your harness, take a look at the how the twin set is set up. Obviously, your instructor knows all these things as well, so don't be disheartened. Frank, I recommend anyone to do fundamentals, and then if you want to do the TDI route, you'll be a much better foundation. Anyways, that's right. So something like GUE fundamentals is a great place to start. Something like TDI's Intro to Tech. Intro always sounds a bit like there's nothing in the course. There's actually quite a lot in the course. It just means that when you start the certification courses, you have a much better idea of what's coming your way. And you've sort of done some of this initial, you've made your learning curve a lot more, easy is the wrong word, but you've made that learning curve less challenging. You've made that a little bit more achievable. And you're certainly not, there's nothing wrong with sort of taking a little bit of extra time. Kelly, if you have, even if you can't go diving, but if you have access to a twin set standing around somewhere, maybe you can do what some people call carpet skills. What does that mean? It pretty much means sitting on the floor with a twin set behind you and playing with valves. If you have your regulators on them, then you can do all the breathing the regulator down, clipping things. You can really play about with it that way. That way you're building muscle memory. It's not the same as being underwater is. We had a 3-month lockdown here where the dive sites were closed, and I came back to diving after that 3 months and I was rusty. Doesn't matter what level you get to, maybe being at a certain level of qualification means that you get your skills back a little bit quicker because they're more dialed in, but there's definitely there's definitely sort of a little bit of a build-up time. Yeah, so go play with your twin set. You can even practice, I don't know if you've got as far, maybe not yet, where you're dealing with identifying manifold failures behind you and running through specific, sort of running through ways of solving failures behind you where you can't easily see where the problem is. That's something that you can practice on the dry as well. And I'm going to just like shamelessly plug the Dark Horizon Diving YouTube channel. There's some skills demo videos on there. Obviously they're demonstrated in the water, but maybe you can take some inspiration from there that might help you on that journey. And do not get disheartened. There's so many things that you can play with, that you can try to get you there. Some people get there fast and others get there slow. Doesn't matter. It's a journey. And every so often there'll be a dive where you think you've practiced everything and then it's not quite coming together. They are not bad dives, they're not waste of time. They're very much sort of a dive where you're kind of going, okay, all right. So there are still things to learn. So there are still occasions not to get complacent about. So all of those are actually quite positive things. Yeah, and practicing dry skills isn't the same, but if you can't get wet, you might as well keep your head in the game and practice some of those movements. It's something that actually the first time I came across that was when I was doing my dive master training years and years ago. And we were preparing for these skill circuits and we were all like, oh my God, we'll never be good enough. But every little bit there helps, everything that you can do. And yes, Frank, absolutely. Case in point. Don't think you'll be able to reach twin set valves going from a 3mm wetsuit to a dry suit with heavy undergarments and dry gloves. Is that what's happened to you? Because that's then a case of taking some time to play and probably adjusting that harness so that you've now got space for that dry suit and the undergarments and the dry gloves, getting your muscle memory back, getting your dexterity, that's the word I'm looking for, getting your dexterity back for your hands to reach the valves. You never had the pleasure of using a 3mm. Well, you're about to call me a wimp, but even here in Bali, I'm never seen in anything thinner than a 5mm, because I find that even when you're coming up, well, one, quite often if you're diving deeper, you have a thermal climb. So you will have a colder part of the dive as you're deeper. And then as you're coming up on your deco, we've got the pleasure here of going all the way up on reefs. So we're following the reef up. We don't do a lot of hanging on shot lines because we just don't need to. But you're still just hanging. So me being a wimp and not used to UK diving temperatures anymore, I get cold towards the end of a dive. So see, Kelly, you've just gone to your dry suit. You'll feel a lot more comfortable. And again, with the dry suit, if this is your first dry suit, try it out. So get a feel for your dry suit will actually really help with trim. It'll really allow you to put lift where you want lift and shift that positive buoyancy around to where you want it. But also remember, going feet up, not that you really do that in twin set much, but going feet up can become a bit problematic because you cannot dump air from your feet. So, and it's a backup buoyancy device again. So, Kelly, it looks like you've got a lot of playing with equipment, with skills and stuff to do. So I like that because there's always new things to discover. There's always things to kind of get into the right ballpark. And you can come back from every dive having kind of fixed one thing and maybe discovered that there's another thing to do that you still want to play with. So I think that you're actually in a really exciting position there where you're pushing your diving a bit, you're changing your equipment around. So yeah, cool. And yes, backup buoyancy. There's other ways of backup buoyancy. A big lift bag will do. You might go for a wing with a dual bladder. All of those come with pros and cons, just like a lot of the things that we went through. Yeah, a lot of the things that we went through in this presentation, advantages, disadvantages to pretty much everything. So keep playing, find out more about what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Just because something is great for one diver doesn't mean it's the perfect solution for another diver. And that's fine. That's, you know, we're all different. Yes, there's a degree of having things the same and having things standardized, and there's really great value to that. But at the end of the day, if something doesn't work for you, then really what you want to spend time on is actually figuring out what works for you so that you can be comfortable, so that you can enjoy those dives, and that you can be comfortable enough to build up to the challenging parts of it all. So yeah, sounds good. Now then, if my clock on this computer is right, we have 2 more minutes, something like that, 1 or 2 more minutes. So if anyone else has any more questions. So Frank's just raised another point. Some dry suits might make it harder to reach twin set valves because of how the seams are done on the armpits. I guess, Kelly, that might be something to practice on the dry if you can. See if you can get, even in a sitting or standing position, where the twin set is roughly where it would be on you if you're in the water, and see if you can reach. see whether you can make adjustments to the harness that will help you with that. Now, before I go, Kelly, I was just about to plug the sidebar presentation that's starting in half an hour. So Kelly, if you're going to try this in the next half an hour, then maybe join me for the sidebar presentation, report back how you're getting on with the twin set and the dry suit. But don't rush. So yes, it's been lovely to talk to you all. I hope I'll see you at the Dark Horizon booth at some point. And yeah, so undergarments, everything. Guys, it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for sticking in the chat and throwing your questions out. And hopefully I will see you in about half an hour. You know how to get to the sessions. And yes, I will chat to you soon. Okay, guys, see you maybe in half an hour. If you've missed this presentation, it's on again tomorrow at 1 p.m. UK time. That's 9 p.m. my time, so it'll be really dark behind me. But if you have any extra questions, jump on in, send the questions, and I'll be happy to answer them then. All right. See you guys soon.